exemplary international standards for prisoners, there are many voices of hope, and many voices of hope actually come from within the United States itself. Over 26 human rights organisations within the United States objected to the European Court judgment. That includes the American Civil Liberties Union, the Centre for Constitutional Rights, Solitary Watch beside us, and 150 academics actually. Not a single mainstream media reported that whatsoever, even the BBC, which is supposed to have a mandate to be balanced. It was an incredibly devastating day to air that European Court judgment, and from that day I took on my brother's campaign full-time and quit my career and other things. Other many voices of hope, one of them's I would like to give special mention to someone called Jean Theo Harris, who wrote an amazing article in The Nation called "A European Court Gives the Green Light to Torture," which you can all find online, and which Dr. Ian Patel's another amazing article in the New Statesman recently, which you may have read, which is a thorough analysis of the European Court judgment. It should also be bear in mind, which hasn't been mentioned, is recently the European Court of Rights did rule positively on a case of someone called Haroon Aswad, who was a schizophrenic. My brother was detained without trial, who I think is the second longest detained without trial British citizen after Babar Ahmad. And Talha watched this person mentally break down and stop consuming food, and eventually be placed in Broadmoor. Theresa May is still determined to have it put him in a supermax prison in the United States. Sorry, getting off on tangent, but so yeah, many people who are I've basically been writing to many people in the UK for many years and had an often humiliating experience, including many sort of celebrity left-wing academics who I thought would automatically be on my side. But within the United States, actually things were people were more responsive and actually eager to help me. Whilst there's a system of repression, there's also a fantastic forms of resistance in the United States. We have so I asked Noam Chomsky whether he'd make a video for my brother, and he made one in a couple of days, which you can all Google and find online on YouTube. James, immediately responded to us. He's written to Talha, even tried to visit Talha in prison, but as a journalist may not be able to do so. Other people I'd like to mention, Bonnie Kness, who's a fantastic Quaker activist who's been campaigning since the 60s. Because these, one should not remember the political nature of isolation. They're very much to subdue people who have a persistent struggle for justice, such as many of the Black Panthers, such as Herman Wallace, who's been in solitary confinement for over 40 years, Robert King, who's been another fantastic supporter of my brother, who was in solitary confinement for 29 years for a crime he was later acquitted of. And one of the voices of hope is a fantastic school in Yale called Yale Visual Law, and please Google them when you go home. And they're basically a group of progressive law students who are also a film collective. And one of the films they made was about this supermax prison my brother's currently detained in Connecticut, and they made it it was completed just around the time he landed, and I discovered it completely by accident. Valarie Kaur, who made it, is an American Sikh who's also an award-winning filmmaker. She made a fantastic film called Divided We Fall, which is one of the best films about post-9/11 Islamophobia, and is a fantastic multi-faith activist. And the reason she made this film is she was one of the delegates who went to Guantanamo Bay, and after visiting Guantanamo Bay, she realised there were conditions in her home land and near where she studied just as bad. Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib, they're very much extensions of the US supermax prisons system, and would even be impossible regardless of that. what, we've talked about ADX Florence, which was described in the European Court judgment. What we haven't talked about is pre-trial solitary confinement. So Talha is actually unconvicted and still innocent in the eyes of the law, but he's subject to the same prison regime as a death row inmate or so forth. There are no limits on pre-trial solitary confinement. You can be there for many years. Talha will be there a minimum for, we've just received news yesterday that Talha's trial has been pushed forward to March 2014, meaning he'd be a minimum of 1 year and 5 months in a solitary confinement cell. Goodness knows the level of irreversible mental damage it will do to him. So this is there's very few pictures of the prison he's held in, and so this is one of the films, and I hope it gives you insight into his current detention and Babar Ahmed's too. Thank you.